This open meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, and the provisions therein as extended by an act relative to extend certain state of emergency accommodations, which was signed into law on July 16th, 2022. These provisions suspend the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. I hereby call to order this meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee on February 22nd, 2024 at 6 p.m. I am Linda Lukowski, Chair of the School Committee, and I would like to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Erin?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Caitlin?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Susanna?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Matthew?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Narissa?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Paul Mayette?
I'm here and I can hear you.
And Paul Lees.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Superintendent Brian Forget.
Here and I can hear you.
Director of Finance and Operations, Kyle Warren.
I'm here and I can hear you.
For this meeting, the Triton School Committee is convening remotely via Zoom using the information posted on the district's website identifying how the public may join. If you are personally attending by video conference using your device's camera, please be aware that others may be able to see you. Committee members and administrators, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of the body are available on the district's website with the agenda posting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. I'm going to read our vision statement. We are a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment to the meeting needs of all students. Through the adoption of best practices and our active partnership with families in the wider community who are united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners, students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. So I would like to add that tonight is Kyle's last meeting. I want to thank you for everything that you've done for the district while you were here, and we wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed working with you all as well.
The next item is oral communications from the public. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Members of the public, the meeting has hosted you as you entered the meeting. If you would like to address the committee, please indicate now that you would like to do so by raising your hand on the video call using the raise hand option on the participant screen. The meeting host will unmute you so that you can address the committee. Please refer to the public comment policy language on the agenda when making your comments, and remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. When you have finished speaking, the meeting host will mute you again. The public comment policy language on the agenda says members of the public may address the committee for up to 3 minutes, longer with the permission of the chairperson. The committee will not engage in discussion on topics raised during public comment, but may choose to add the topic to a future agenda. This agenda segment will be limited to 15 minutes. Is there anybody in the public that?
I do not. You have 6 people and I do not see anyone digitally raising their hand or unmuting themselves, which they should be able to do.
Okay.
Turning their camera on, so I'm going to assume no.
Okay, we have a transportation reimbursement MOU.
So that's going to go right to Kyle.
Yeah, I can tackle this one. So the state has changed the way that we receive reimbursement for the cost of transporting students who are in a DCF placement. Quick background on that is if a student is in a DCF placement in another community, a Triton student, and say they're at a placement in Bedford, we're responsible for the cost of transporting that student from Bedford to Triton, their respective school each day. The state has a reimbursement method of about, it usually averages around 20% of that cost. And in order to be eligible for that reimbursement, the district's required to sign off through a vote of the committee authorizing either Brian or I to sign this MOU that basically spells out the mechanics of the reimbursement process. It's technically between the Office of Health and Human Services, DESE, DCF, and Triton. And the short of it is it says we'll be in compliance with the requirements of that reimbursement process. Nothing too complicated there, but I'm requesting that the committee take a vote to enable us to submit for that reimbursement.
Does anybody have any comments or questions for Kyle? Seeing none, can I have a motion to authorize the superintendent of schools to execute a memorandum of understanding on behalf of the Triton Regional School District for the purposes of receiving Title IV-E reimbursement pursuant to MGL 4470?
Make the motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? We have to have a roll call vote. Erin,
Yes.
Caitlin,
Yes.
Susanna,
Yes.
Matthew,
Yes.
Marissa,
Yes.
Paul Mayette,
Yes.
Paul Lees,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. Now we'll
Thank
go
you.
on to the FY25 budget update. Last week, I received word that there was updated information from the member towns, and we scheduled additional meetings, including 2 this week. Many of you were able to make the virtual district communication meeting Tuesday night. Both Newbury Select Board Chairperson on behalf of the Select Board and Salisbury Town Manager on behalf of the town of Salisbury provided written statements prior to the meeting, which are attached to the agenda. These stated that the Salisbury could afford the increase estimated under scenario 2 of about $660,000, and that they support an increase that more fully meets the needs of Triton students, and that the Newbury Select Board had voted to recommend the lowest of the increase models, scenario 3. The Raleigh Select Board had sent a letter weeks previously also advocating for scenario 3. The town representatives were able to speak to the statements, and we had a long discussion. There have been some budget updates since we last met on February 13th. The superintendent is going to talk about the new information, and then I want to provide a little background on conversations I've had between Tuesday and tonight. Brian?
So just a quick recap, right? So we've keep talking about green scenarios and scenarios 1, 2, and 3, but just to reframe this in context to make sure everyone's clear on what we're talking about. Scenario 1 became the green scenario, which became the tentative budget. So our tentative budget is about $4,000 less than, sorry, I'm playing dual roles. There's people in the waiting room. Sorry. Our budget became down about $4,000. Our tentative budget became that scenario 1. As Linda shared, the request was, we have 2 towns asking for us to be at or about the scenario 3, and 1 town asking to be at or about scenario 2. Scenario 2 is a reduction of about $232,000. Scenario 3 is a reduction of about $482,000. So I just wanted to clarify the to this point, the current budget includes $962,000 worth of cuts already. That is detailed now, we can say on the exact page number, that is detailed on pages 2 and 3. I'm sorry, 1, 2, and 3 of the budget document. Actually, it is pages 2 and 3 of the budget document. We confined our process this year knowing that we were going to have a challenging budget year. So the original budget proposal included some reductions. I want to clarify there, we use the term reduction, we use the term cut, there's lots of different terms. The 962,000 is both cuts, right? Cuts that will impact the offerings that we'll be able to provide to our students, SEL teacher, STEM teacher. It also includes some right sizing of some programs that, because of lower enrollments, we talked about the 2 special educators at Salisbury Elementary, because of enrollments, because of caseloads on IEPs, those numbers can be reduced to right size without impacting programming to students. So the goal, right, from that point forward was, knowing we likely needed to move with further reductions, the goal is to find reductions that some will have to be cuts and some will have to be reductions. So some of the things that we have identified, we mentioned last week, the fact that our dental insurance actually came in. We were budgeting 6% on everything. We were told last week, assume 7.82. That came true for, we have that in writing and confirmed. Kyle confirmed that. That is for all medical plans. Our dental actually came in at 2.6%. So that savings, to be specific, is $20,867. There's another, we've been looking at, I mean, literally every stone. We are still carrying student accident insurance. As we've reviewed our policies, we now with Fred C. Church, working with them, they've said it's really a redundant policy because other more broad policies, as we've adapted them, provide that coverage. This isn't the optional insurance that parents can sign up for. This is general accident insurance. So that $5,707 will be able to show that as a reduction. There's a potential at one of the elementaries that enrollments are looking lower. So we might not need 3 sections. We might only need 2 sections. And again, that's not to say the class sizes will be big. We only have 34 students at Pine Grove currently registered for kindergarten. We have 3 sections at the moment. If we don't need, if we were to reduce a section, that doesn't impact class sizes. It's just we have less students, so we would need less teachers. So I just wanted to make sure that we were clear in the fact that already in the tentative budget, there are cuts. There are cuts that will impact services, and there's some right sizing that won't be an impact. It's about the process that we take every year to make sure that we are adapting to the needs and the overall student enrollment. And so the approach will be the same thing as you give us guidance tonight, as far as what that target will be. That it will be both some of the, the insurance and the student accident insurance. Those are savings, right? That's not a cut. That's just a savings that continues to materialize. And it'll be a combination of both those as well as some cuts to get to what I'm assuming will be target 2 in the vicinity to target 3, or scenario 2 to 3, but that's a discussion to be had tonight. You're muted, Linda.
Sorry about that. Before we begin the discussion, I wanted to let you know that I've had a few conversations since Tuesday. While the estimate scenarios are important, they also provide a false structure because the numbers are just staggered estimates for modeling purposes. They don't correspond to direct cuts in our budget items, nor do they match exactly what the towns have available for their revenue to support the Triton budget. My current understanding is that scenario 2, which is an overall increase of roughly 2.25 million, is beyond the ability of 2 of the 3 towns to support in their assessments. But there may be some flexibility in one of those towns' budgets for the increase to be higher than scenario 3, which is a roughly $2 million increase. As a reminder, the district budget must be passed in at least 2 of the 3 member town meetings in order to be considered approved. The goal for the discussion tonight is to give the superintendent some input on what direction the committee would like him to take, to bring a new proposal to the meeting on February 28th. I'd like now to open to the committee for any input that the committee would like to give. Anybody?
guess I can go first.
Yeah.
Oh, Matt, go ahead.
I would say, obviously not get to the blue box, scenario 3. And if we can't do scenario 2, maybe cut a little off of scenario 2 and see where that lands. Realistically, what you can do and without a lot of impact to services.
Thank
I
you, Matt.
I was hoping we could go to 2, but if we can't, we can't. Thank you.
Do you mind if I go next, Linda?
Go right ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I right along, I guess, with what Matt said, you know, I'm hesitant to cut anymore as well. I mean, we don't want to, there already are impacts. I have concerns in particular about some of the things that we've talked about in the past, like the teacher at Salisbury Elementary, talking about the assistant principal at the high school, talking about the wellness coordinator. I think those would be, you know, pretty severe in the way that they would affect students, just because we know those are all, as much as, well, obviously the classroom is a constantly facing student role, but the other ones are support roles, and I'm always hesitant when I know that there is so much to be done and so much that sort of hangs in the balance. And I always, you know, you're going to disrupt what little balance there is, and those people already don't have enough time in their day, and then you try and pull either the wellness coordinator or you pull an assistant principal, and I think, you know, everything gets affected from there on down, because that assistant principal is going into a classroom or into a hallway or into a bathroom and dealing with diffusing situations in some cases that may be would negatively impact more than just that one student. You know, sometimes that one situation that they're diffusing is impacting 30 students or 60 students in the way that they're able to learn later in the day. I feel like there's some hope here. I understand. I believe that we need to pass a budget on the first go. I, like Matt, don't want to go much below. You know, I don't want to go any farther than we have to. I would like to, I guess, you know, go below scenario 2, hopefully not as far as scenario 3, but I'd really like to steer clear of those things that are going to be super impactful in the way that I perceive those 3 positions in particular as being. I just struggle with those and how negatively it could affect a lot of students.
Is there anybody else? Go ahead, Paul Mayette.
You know, I maintain the position I've held all along, is that I really do believe that the towns should be asking for an override, particularly Newbury. I can sit here and say that our tax rate and the changes that have happened in this town, as far as like taxes as a percentage of income, just don't justify saying we can't afford that. I don't think that I'm hearing a lot of enthusiasm for that position, but for sure I would not go below scenario 2. I mean, I began this process not wanting to go as low as scenario 1, so but I just don't, there's nothing that I've heard in the conversations that I've had with town officials, with our DCC meetings, that have led me to feel that there's a justification for the asks that have been made. They just haven't come back to us with anything that I've really felt was a reasonable argument.
Thank you, Paul. Anybody else? Go ahead, Erin.
Thanks, Linda. I'm with Paul. I'm worried about going to 2 and below. We've already cut a ton out of the budget, and it's making me really nervous and anxious to even think about what else is going to have to be cut in programming to be able to get to a lower number. I would try to stay as close to the 2 as we can and see what it takes, what Brian and his staff has to offer, or what they can share with us. I do think that there's a huge disconnect between the people that are contacting us, as well as the outreach to the town reps themselves, with an understanding of what they're looking for services in the school and what they're looking and expecting for us to provide. And I'm not sure that their communications are necessarily going from those parents to their town reps. And I really wish that the communication all around was better in that angle. We've heard a lot from parents and outreach and conversations about things that they feel that they need at their school, and I'm afraid of cutting beyond that, what it's going to look like and what we're going to have to rip apart, because it takes an awful lot of time to try and build something back into it after we've removed it or after we've taken something out.
Thank you, Erin. Go ahead, Caitlin.
Thank you, Linda. I guess I'm very concerned, and I have from the beginning said I don't want to go below the green box scenario, and I understand where our towns are coming from. But going with Narissa and Matt's points, I don't see the cuts that we can make that wouldn't negatively impact a large amount of our students. And like Erin said, once it's cut, it's gone, and putting it back into the budget is going to be really difficult. And I'm not sure how many parents or families are aware of what the current level of cuts are going to do to their students. So I would say I would like to work with our towns, but I'm not sure, Brian, what you can remove that's not going to have severe negative impacts on our students. Losing the 6th grade teachers feels disastrous. Losing a kindergarten teacher, when it's not based on numbers, but based because we need to save money. These are some of our most vulnerable populations that those cuts are starting to look at. So I am very nervous, and I guess I'm interested to see, I know we have to at least go to the second scenario and look at those cuts, but I'm interested to see where those come from, because support roles, like Narissa said, are as valuable as student-facing roles. So I will say that I'm hesitant. I understand where our towns are coming from, and I'd like to see those numbers. But Brian, I can't even give you a possible direction because I'm not sure that there's any cut that wouldn't lead to harming some cross-section of our students. So I guess with Matt and Narissa, as close as you can get to scenario 2. But I would really like the town officials to hear more from families, because as we make these cuts or as these get discussed, I think it's going to be some bigger impacts than they think. And I think it's going to cost more money down the road.
Thank you, Caitlin. Anybody else? Paul
I
Mayette?
just have a quick question, if I could. And so this goes back to something Narissa said, and this is not questioning it. This is wanting me to understand and clarify. You talked about the need to pass a budget on the first pass. And obviously that's, I understand why that is the best case scenario. But I guess my way of looking at it, so I want to know what I have wrong or what I'm missing in all of this. My way of looking at it is, if we were to go for an override and we lose, then we're no worse off than we are right now. We lost it, and we wind up at these cuts that we're looking at, which I guess is why I'm so much in favor of that. I'd rather try and then end up here. So what is the missing piece that puts you in that different spot?
Yeah, so I guess I've got a few thoughts on that. One is that that I think there is a backlash anytime you have a an override and it fails, or even an override and it passes. So it's either you just came to me and I already said no, why are you coming to me again? And it's this immediate kind of defensive, because unfortunately, you know, when voters are dealing with these questions, they're dealing with them once. It's not a throughout the year process like we are. So I don't think there's as detailed an understanding of what's coming in front of them and how it might compare to something in the past, or what the process even is. I know when we failed a budget years ago, we came back with the second one and they were like, we already said no. What do you mean was part of the reaction that we got. Like, you can't just be done at that point, right? That's not how it works. Then you don't have a budget at all. You have to go back. So part of it is that, and then part of it is that I have this concern that we're going to need to do a building project, down the road. We're in the MSBA pipeline. I know we're applying again, before April, and you can only go back so many times, and whether you pass, if you tried for an override today, whether you pass or fail that override, that's going to reflect on another override down the road. And, the Byfield campus is not going to survive long term, right? That MSBA opening is going to come around, or in worst case, we have to go to whatever plan B the facilities subcommittee comes to at some point. But it's going to be some significant money, and what I guess you can't have a building that's totally understaffed, right? And you can't have a staff that has no building to teach in. So I'm trying to find a middle ground, and I think the best middle ground that we can find right now is to get as solid of a budget passed on the first try that we can this year. And then at some point down the road, I think I can't foresee a future where at some point there isn't a debt exclusion override somewhere in the future. It might be 5 years down the road, but that's still within the sort of working memory of the voters from what I've perceived.
Go ahead, Pauline.
So I just wanted to share what I've shared with Brian privately, and I'm not sure. I think it goes hand in hand with what Narissa has said about trying to affect as few students as possible. But if there were going to be additional cuts, I think it should be in the programming at the high school, in the electives. I'm not sure when it was last, but when we were in this scenario a long time ago, I remember trying to think outside the box, and students that were in advanced language programs, they were only servicing 2 or 3 or 4. I think there were steps made to try to outsource their schooling to maybe colleges or other programs online that would still effectuate that, but would permit the staff member to be cut. And so I just throw that out there. That's my 2 cents in terms of trying to affect the fewest students possible. And I know the breadth of the program, across the board is very important, but if we're going to continue to cut, that's what I'd like to do.
Thank you, Paul. And my thought on it is we're not only looking at this year for these cuts or reductions, we're looking at how these will affect our students further on down the road as well. We just came out of COVID, and students are just starting to get back to learning and really making progress in what they're doing. A lot of the supports that we have in place is helping these students. I personally don't want us to go below scenario 2. I think as you get closer to scenario 3, I think there will be a lot of detrimental things that are going to happen for the learning of our students. Again, they're just starting to make traction And we're seeing that progress with some of the assessments that we've seen in the past few months. I don't want to see our students go backwards and cutting, especially the wellness coordinator that we worked so hard to get in there. He is very beneficial to what Brian and his team is trying to do to support our students. So from what I hear from the committee, Brian, to try and get to scenario 2 as best you can.
Okay.
If we have to go a little bit below, but I would try and stay as close to that scenario 2 as we can. I understand that all of us would like to see it between 1 and 2, but we also have to try and be mindful of what our towns have asked.
So I will bring to you next week, clear cut, how we would get to, how I would propose we get to scenario 2. And then, right, there's not going to be other shocking things, the other things we've been talking about of how we would potentially get to scenario 3. And we'll be able to have that more informed discussion.
I want to thank Brian and especially Kyle, with it being his last meeting, for all the work that you've done. I know that doing this budget has been very hard to try and get to what is needed for the 3 towns and the schools. I appreciate all the work that you've put in. And Kyle, hopefully you've passed on all that knowledge to the new Brian.
Still working on names for old Brian and new Brian, but I want to echo that, my appreciation to the work that Kyle has done. It's hard enough to transition in a role, but to be transitioning in the midst of this craziness, right? This feels an awful lot like 2009, 2010, like those days where we were making cut lists of $2.5 million. So obviously we're not to that level, but it has certainly been challenging because we've already trimmed the budget so tight that we don't have the places to cut that we did 20 years ago. But kudos to Kyle. He's done an incredible amount of work. And then Brian was actually in today, doesn't officially start again until March 4th. But he's in the system. He's got an active email, and he spent a solid 6 or 7 hours today, is the phrase, geeking out over numbers. And so I feel like Kyle's done tremendous work, and he's handing it to Brian, and we've got someone who is very capable and will take the reins and run with it. So thank you, Kyle.
Thank you. We have a great team here at Triton, and been fortunate to lean on all of you to navigate this process and over the last few years as well. Just super appreciative. Thank you.
And good luck in all your future things with your family.
Thank you so much.
Our next meeting will be a school committee meeting on February 28th, followed by the budget public hearing and committee discussion on March 6th. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Any discussion? We have to have a roll call vote. Erin,
Yes.
Caitlin,
Yes.
Susanna,
Yes.
Matthew,
Yes.
Narissa,
Yes.
Paul Mayette,
Yes.
and Paul Lees.
Yes.
Thank you all. Have a nice night.